Hey guys, so I want to address something that happened at Donald Trump's inauguration, or at least after the inauguration, I believe, where Elon Musk did what seemed to be a Nazi salute. So the first question is, did he do a quote unquote Nazi salute? Some people are saying it was just a result of him being awkward. That's the thing I want to talk about. And some people are being, I think, is a little pedantic, saying that he didn't do a Nazi salute, he did a Roman salute. Well, here's the thing. That quote Roman salute, that is actually a result, I think, of popular culture from the 1800s, of maybe when it was depicted in, I think, plays where they're showing the Roman Empire. So it was first done by the Italian fascists, who were trying to kind of harken back to the rebuilding the Roman Empire, and then it was borrowed by the Nazis, and eventually the Nazis kind of overshadow the Italian fascist government. So now they're kind of giving credit for it, right? But the thing is, if Elon Musk actually did that intentionally and not was just being quote unquote awkward, he did it because it's associated with the Nazis, not because he's a big fan of Julius Caesar or Marcus Aurelius. Let's get that out of the way. So let's just assume that he was doing a Nazi salute. And as soon as I saw it, I knew that people were it was going to evolve to, he just did something because he's awkward, he's not a white supremacist, and then it's going to somehow evolve to, he's awkward to, the autism made him do it. Autism made him do it, right? So would being autistic be an excuse for doing something like that on stage? And the simple answer to that is the simple answer to that is no. The simple answer of that is no. And first of all, does Elon Musk have autism? I don't know if he was ever officially diagnosed, but he was on Saturday Night Live, where he said, "I'm the first person to host a show with Asperger's," which I don't think is true. He's definitely not the first. Well, he's definitely not the first person to be on the show who has Asperger's syndrome. And then some people are like, well, which one is it? Is it Asperger's or is it autism? Well, since 2013, Asperger's been put in the same category as autism by the DSM-5, which is basically this manual that people who mental health professionals use to diagnose mental differences or disorders. There are some slight differences between what used to be called autism, which was largely something called Kenner syndrome, and what was and Asperger's. Kenner syndrome was studied by a guy named Leo Kenner. Actually, it was studied by a Russian psychiatrist before him, but Leo Kenner, who's an American, gets a lot of the credit for studying what we traditionally call autism. And Asperger's was studied by a guy named Hans Asperger, who was an Austrian psychiatrist, and they were kind of contemporaries of one another. And there's really kind of a debate on whether Hans Asperger was a collaborator of the Nazis. I'm not really trying to get into that. So if I don't think Elon Musk was ever, I don't know if he was ever officially diagnosed with Asperger's. If he, as old as he was, if he'd been diagnosed as a youth, it would have been Asperger's, and it would not have been autism. So the reason I say that that's not an excuse is because, and I think the modern framing of autism really kind of puts this fairly well. If Elon Musk were to be diagnosed with autism, and let's assume he does, because even if he was never officially diagnosed, he is at least self-diagnosing, which I think is legit. He seems that he would have what would be referred to as level 1 support needs. And so now autism gets put into 3 categories: level 1, level 2, level 3, depending on the support needs. and he would clearly have very low support needs. I say clearly, but low support needs may come down to just, if you're his friend or if you're his intimate partner, you'd have to be maybe kind of understanding of eccentricities. And there's actually videos out where he's interacting with his family, and you can kind of see where that would have to be a thing, right? So the reason I would just say no is because associated with those support needs is kind of, I'll say the level of the ability to learn. So a lot of people, they associate having I'm kind of careful with this, not because I'm, there's specific terms I want to use, but having, I know you can't say, I guess say learning difficulties as they say, and as they would say in Europe, or mental impairment. And basically, often a lot of, and it's not even always the case, but often a lot of people who have like level 2, level 3 support needs, there's some type of mental impairment. That's not always the case. Someone could have, for example, level 2 support needs, and they have kind of, I guess selective mutism, where in certain situations they can't speak, where they have high sensory needs, where basically the world can be very difficult for them to interact with, and very sensitive. And then these exact same people can have like above average IQs. So you can be sitting there talking to someone who the only way they can communicate with you is with a device, where they have to talk through the device a lot of the time, and they can barely interact with the world. But if you were to sit there and say, hey, take an IQ test, they would score, above you. So it's not necessarily it's not necessarily having high support needs means that you have a low IQ, but often that is the case. So what a lot of people do is they associate, when they say someone has quote unquote severe autism, they associate that with having mental impairment. Matter of fact, they think autism is almost like a synonym for mental impairment, and that's not the case. The three main factors that go into autism, the three things that they look at is, one, some type of sensory, either being hyper or hyposensitive. So think about having a reaction to sounds, to being touched, either under responding, over responding to sounds, to light stimulation. Just think of like, I'm sure you've seen in a movie or something where they have someone with autism, there's like a lot of talking and a lot of yelling, and the person starts doing that, and they're trying to self-regulate themselves, right? So being hypo or hypersensitive to some type of stimulation. It can be touch, it can be sounds. For me, it's smells and sounds, and to a lesser degree, touch. I'm not and actually the touch thing is a result of the sounds. If I'm in a crowded room, someone touching me just agitates me. Like I love my mother, but even my mother, like if we're out in the crowd, whatever, and my mother's like, give me a hug, it agitates me. If it's quiet, I don't mind it so much. Same thing with smells. I don't like the smell of perfumes in certain foods or whatever. They feel loud to me. The other thing is, so the second one is repetitive behaviors. So the repetitive behaviors can range from everything to people who are kind of rocking back and forth, which is a stimulating, basically to calm yourself. It can be repetitive behaviors, as in you have rituals. Think about, it's not the most accurate example, but think about Rain Man, where he has a routine where he eats this thing, he watches this show, whatever. And basically the result of that is you feel like you live in a chaotic world, and you're trying to bring some type of order to it. So for me, I often wear the same colors. I tend to wear kind of the same clothes. It makes everything feel kind of relaxed and controlled for me. And I tend to go to the same stores. Like I have favorite stores I go to. People who know me, they even kind of joke around with me about it and whatnot. And the other thing is, and I guess the third thing is picking up, and I'm being kind of broad with these, and it could be a little bit, but whatever, be a bit more specific. But the other thing is picking up social cues, reading nonverbal cues, that sort of thing. And that's kind of the thing where when we say someone is quote unquote awkward, it's kind of a result of that. You can see someone out in a crowd with a bunch of people, and they may be doing something like what's called stimming, which is the rocking back or forth, the playing with their heads, or what's called, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, echolalia, which is repeating a thing Like somebody says a thing and then you kind of repeat it to yourself, which I sometimes have a habit of doing. Somebody saying, I kind of catch myself. But just like, for example, think of people who can't read the room. Honestly, I'm actually pretty good with quote unquote reading the room. But there are times where I would say I can come off as a little insensitive, where it's like, I don't mean to basically sound like a jerk, but to me, something that I think would be funny, or to me, it'll be like, this would be the time to be funny, and it's not the time to be funny. So going back to the thing with Elon Musk, why would I say no to that? Well, here's the thing. It's one thing to kind of be around around a bunch of people and you kind of make an off-color joke, or you do a thing which is kind of like, which is unacceptable, right? And I see with this is that, one, as much as we can say, you know, a lot of people, I would say on the left, and maybe people aren't on the left, who over the years have kind of been annoyed by Elon Musk's behavior, his rightward turn, his labor practices, his misogyny, his weird breeding fetish. They've said that he's the world's richest idiot. They like Elon Musk is not a dumb guy. Let's get that out of the way. Elon Musk isn't a stupid guy. So he would know that being on stage at a conservative rally and doing a Nazi salute would not be a thing you would want to do. He would know all of the context of that, because even though, for all the awkward behavior we see of Elon Musk, he's smart enough to know what things look like. He's smart enough to realize how he appears to the world. The irony is this: if Elon Musk, let's say, supposedly had been a Democratic supporter, and I know that this may sound hypocritical, but hear me out. If he'd been a Democratic supporter, well, I'll stick with it. If he'd been not only a supporter of the Democrats, but let's say that as much of the things that he says kind of fall into the category of right-wing rhetoric, kind of replacement theory and all that, let's move that over to the left. And he was constantly talking about how we need to socialize healthcare, how we need to have harbor to immigrants, be a refuge for people from other countries, people from non-white countries. He was saying all that. Like, he was just, as much as he is using kind of the far right rhetoric now, he was just get that and kind of move it over to the left. And then he was on stage and by the way, and he's given millions of dollars. Not only, let's forget about the Democratic Party, he's given millions of dollars to like the ACLU. He's given millions of dollars to like kind of the Democratic Socialists of America, and he's on stage and he does that. I would be almost willing to put that to the autism. And the reason why is because at that point, I would say someone who has demonstrated with their money, with their time, with their behavior, that they are not just liberal, but not a liberal, but a leftist, and they do that, I'd be like, oh, that person is clearly they think they're being funny. And it's like, that would be a situation where, like, I know you thought that was a funny joke, and everybody realizes that you're not that person because, you know, you've just spent months and years and whether advocating for minorities and other marginalized people, and you're like, I can do this because I have the capital and people know what's in my heart. I would almost say, like, I would be like, yeah, maybe it's a possibility of the result of being on the spectrum. Because quite frankly, I've never done a Nazi salute, but I've definitely made some jokes, which people who know me will be like, that's you shouldn't say that in certain circles because that's not going to be acceptable. For example, what these, what would make all women look better if they smiled more, saying things like that, which I know is not the equivalent of doing a Nazi salute, or what these women need to do is go make me a sandwich. Stuff that I know is like so ridiculous that people who know me will be like, we know you're not a misogynist, but I also know that that people who don't know me will find that like offensive. But I've said those things because I'm like, oh, wait a minute, these people don't know me. I'm being a parody of the ridiculous person that I know that, whatever. But the fact that he's basically with a party, the head of his party has said that there's basically good sides on the Nazis, and that he's quote unquote piled around with white supremacists and uses white supremacist language, blood libel, racial replacement theory, all that other stuff. In that case, I'm not giving him that grace, and autism is not an excuse. Elon Musk, I don't know if he is a quote Nazi. I don't know if he's a white supremacist, but it's kind of one of those things where I think of the Kurt Vonnegut book, I think it's Mother Night, where if there's a great quote, be careful what you pretend to be or something. But yeah, whether you are a thing or not, if you act like that thing long enough, it doesn't really matter.